I raised my daughter alone, gave her everything I had, and one day, she looked at me and said, "He's my husband now. You come second." That was the moment I realized losing her would hurt more than losing anyone else in my life. This is the story of how my daughter chose her husband over me, and the ending no one saw coming. I am an old American woman. The day my daughter stopped calling did not arrive with drama. There was no argument, no sharp words, no final phone call filled with tears or anger. It came quietly, slipping into my life like a shadow at dusk, soft, unnoticed at first, until suddenly everything felt darker and colder. And I couldn't remember when the light had left. It was a Sunday. Sundays had always belonged to Emily and me. For years, college, her first job, even after she met Mark, Sunday calls were sacred. Sometimes they were quick, rushed between errands. Other times they stretched into an hour of laughter, complaints, memories, and the kind of comfortable silence that only comes from deep familiarity. That morning, I woke early out of habit. I brewed coffee, the same way I always did, and sat at the small kitchen table by the window. The sunlight spilled across the floor, warming the old linoleum, and for a moment, everything felt normal. My phone lay face up beside my mug. I checked the time. 9:17 a.m. She usually called around 9. I smiled to myself, imagining her voice. Maybe she'd tell me about a fight she and Mark had laughed through. Maybe about a recipe she tried and ruined. Maybe she'd just ask what I was making for dinner like she always used to. I took a sip of coffee and waited. By 10 o'clock, I was still waiting. She's busy, I told myself. She's married now. She has her own life. That was the sentence I'd been repeating to myself for months, like a prayer, like a shield. By noon, the coffee was cold, and my smile had faded. I picked up my phone and typed a simple message. "Hey sweetheart, everything okay?" I stared at the screen before pressing send, suddenly afraid of how needy it looked. I erased it, typed again, sent it. The message showed delivered. No reply. I set the phone down and tried to distract myself. I cleaned the kitchen, even though it was already clean. I folded laundry that didn't need folding. I turned the television on just to fill the silence. By evening, my chest felt tight, not with panic yet, but with something heavier, something unfamiliar. Loneliness has a sound. It hums softly, like a refrigerator running in an empty house. You don't notice it at first. Then suddenly, it's all you can hear. That night, I went to bed early, my phone on the nightstand, screen facing up. She didn't call. I told myself it was just one Sunday. But deep down, something inside me whispered, "This is the beginning." My name is Margaret Anderson. I am 61 years old, and for most of my life, my daughter Emily was not just my child, she was my purpose. I had Emily later in life, after years of trying and failing and quietly grieving miscarriages I never spoke about. Doctors gave us polite smiles and cautious optimism, but I learned quickly not to hope too loudly. When Emily finally arrived, screaming and red-faced and very much alive, I cried harder than I ever had before. Her father, David, held her like she was made of glass. He kept whispering, "She's real. She's really here," as if he was afraid she might disappear if he stopped saying it. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was good. We lived in a modest house. We didn't take fancy vacations, but our dinner table was loud, and our weekends were full. David coached her little league team. I volunteered at her school. We were present. We were together. Then, one Tuesday morning, everything ended. David collapsed while tying his shoes for work. One moment he was laughing about a crooked shoelace. The next he was on the floor, gasping for air, his face already changing. The paramedics came fast. They still couldn't save him. Emily was 8 years old. I remember kneeling in front of her, my hands shaking so badly I had to sit on the floor to steady myself. She held her stuffed rabbit, the ears already worn thin from years of love. "Where's Daddy?" she asked. I didn't know how to tell her. How do you explain death to a child when you barely understand it yourself? When I finally did, her scream broke something inside me that never fully healed. She cried for weeks, for months. Sometimes she'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night, convinced she heard him calling her. I slept beside her bed for nearly a year. After that, it was just the two of us. I became everything. I worked 2 jobs, one during the day, One at night, I learned how to fix leaky faucets and broken doorknobs. I attended every parent-teacher meeting, every recital, every award ceremony. I was tired all the time, but I was proud. Emily grew into a gentle, thoughtful girl. She hugged me before school every morning. She left notes on the fridge, "Love you, Mom," written in messy handwriting. When she left for college, I cried for days. She called me every night that first week, homesick and overwhelmed. By the second year, she called once a week. By graduation, once every 2 weeks. Still, she always called, until she didn't. Mark entered her life quietly. She mentioned him casually at first. A coworker, someone she had lunch with, someone who made her laugh. Then suddenly, he was everywhere. Mark says I should think about moving closer to the city. Mark thinks I'm too hard on myself. Mark doesn't really like spicy food. His opinions slipped into our conversations like they had always been there. When she brought him home for dinner, I tried to be welcoming. I really did. I cooked her favorite meal. I wore my nicest sweater. I practiced polite conversation in my head like a nervous teenager. Mark was charming, confident, well-spoken, but there was something else too. He answered questions meant for her. He interrupted her stories to correct small details. He placed a hand on her back, not gently, but firmly, like an anchor. I noticed. Mothers always do. I told myself not to judge. Love makes people change. Maybe this was normal. When he proposed, Emily called me crying with happiness. "He proposed, Mom." I said yes. I congratulated her. I meant it. But after we hung up, I sat alone on my bed and stared at the wall for a long time, trying to quiet the fear that had begun to grow roots inside me. Wedding planning made it worse. Decisions were made without me. Plans were finalized before I was informed. Mark's parents were deeply involved. Venues, guest lists, flowers, while I was politely included as an afterthought. When I offered to help financially, Mark declined for both of them. "We want to do this ourselves," he said. Emily didn't argue. That should have been my warning. The wedding was beautiful. Emily looked radiant. When she walked down the aisle, I stood proudly, tears streaming down my face, telling myself this was what I had raised her for, to be loved. But when she hugged me after the ceremony, I noticed something else. She didn't linger. After the wedding, Emily moved 3 hours away to Mark's hometown. We promised weekly calls. At first, she kept that promise. Then life got busy. Then calls became shorter. Then texts replaced calls. Then silence began to stretch between messages. And then came that Sunday, the one where she didn't call at all. The next morning, I woke up with a strange heaviness in my chest. The kind you feel after a bad dream you can't quite remember. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. I waited 2 days before calling her myself. She answered on the third ring. "Oh, hey, Mom," she said, distracted. I could hear something in the background. Mark's voice. Laughter. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. "I didn't hear from you Sunday. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay." There was a pause. "Yeah, everything's fine. We were just busy." That word landed harder than it should have. "Oh," I said. "Of course. I just missed you." Another pause. "I'll call you later, okay?" "Mark's waiting." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone in my hand, my reflection faintly visible on the dark screen. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. I wasn't her priority anymore, and I had no idea how fast that would turn into being an inconvenience. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. I didn't know how much more I would lose, and I certainly didn't know that one day my daughter would look at me and make a choice, one that would change both of our lives forever. The first time my daughter chose her husband over me, I didn't recognize it for what it was. That's the thing about heartbreak, it rarely announces itself. It doesn't kick down the door or shout its intentions. Most of the time, it shows up dressed as something harmless, practical, reasonable, easy to excuse. I excused it. I had been doing that a lot lately. It started with Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving had always been ours. Even after Emily moved out, even after college, even after she met Mark, she came home every year. I cooked too much food. She teased me about it. We ate leftovers for days, and I loved every minute of it. So when I called her in early October to talk about plans, I didn't think twice. "I was thinking you and Mark could come down Wednesday night," I said, already picturing it. I'll make your favorite stuffing, the one with the extra sage. There was silence on the line. Then she cleared her throat. Actually, we were thinking of going to Mark's parents' house this year. I laughed lightly, waiting for the punchline. Oh, that's nice, I said. You can do that Christmas. Thanksgiving's kind of our thing. Another pause. Mom, Mark's mom already planned it. She really wants us there. Something tightened in my chest. Well, I said carefully, I've already started planning too. You always come home for Thanksgiving. I know, she said quickly. It's just, things change. There it was again. Things change. I swallowed. So you're not coming? I asked. We might stop by for dessert, she offered. If we're not too tired, dessert. After 25 years of traditions. I see, I said. And I did. For the first time. I truly did. When Thanksgiving came, I cooked anyway. Old habits die hard. I roasted the turkey, mashed the potatoes, baked the pies. The house smelled like memory and comfort and loss. I set the table for 3 before realizing my mistake and removing one place setting. Emily texted around 8 that night. Sorry, Mom. Long day. We're heading home. No dessert. No visit. I ate alone. And still, I told myself it was fine. A few weeks later, I decided to visit. I didn't tell her until the day before. I wanted it to be casual, low pressure. I was thinking of coming up Saturday, I said on the phone, just for the day. There was hesitation in her voice. Saturday's not great. Oh, I said. Why not? Mark and I have plans. Plans? What kind of plans? She sighed, and I hated that sound more than anything. Mom, we're busy. You can't just drop in anymore. That sentence landed like a slap. I wasn't dropping in, I said quietly. I asked. Yes, she said. But you assume I'll say yes. I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. I'll let you know another time, she said. Okay. She hung up before I could answer. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation. Every word, every tone, wondering when I'd cross the invisible line from mother to burden. The first real confrontation came in February. It was Emily's birthday. I mailed her a gift, a photo album I'd spent weeks putting together. Pictures from childhood, handwritten notes beside each one. Little memories she might have forgotten. I wanted to remind her where she came from, who loved her first. I waited anxiously for her call. When it came, her voice was polite. Thanks for the album, she said. It was sweet, sweet. Not emotional, not touched, just sweet. I thought you'd like it, I said. I spent a lot of time on it. I know, she replied. But Mark thinks it's a little much. My fingers tightened around the phone. A little much? I repeated. He says we should focus on making new memories instead of living in the past, as if her childhood were something to outgrow. Well, I said, choosing my words carefully. I don't think remembering where you come from is living in the past. She sighed again. Mom, why do you always make things so heavy? That was the moment. The first time I realized she was choosing his perspective over mine, not quietly, not accidentally, but deliberately. I'm not making things heavy, I said. I just miss you. There was a long pause. I can't be everything to you anymore, she said. I felt something crack inside me. I never asked you to be, I whispered. Yes, you do, she snapped. Every call, every visit, it's like you expect me to still live my life around you. That's not fair, I said, my voice shaking. I just want to be part of your life, and you are, she said. But you don't come first anymore. There it was. The truth. I know Mark is important, I said slowly. But I'm your mother, and he's my husband, she replied. The words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't raise you to forget me, I said before I could stop myself. Her voice hardened. I didn't marry him to hurt you. That's not what I said. But that's what it sounds like. The line went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was calm. Too calm. I don't want to argue. Mark and I are a team now. You need to respect that. A team. And where does that leave me? I asked. There was hesitation. Just a second. Mom, she said gently. You have to understand he's my family now. Family. The word echoed in my head long after the call ended. After that conversation, things changed. She called less. When she did call, Mark was always nearby, listening, occasionally correcting her. Once, When I asked if she could visit for a weekend, I heard him laugh in the background. "She's busy," he said loudly enough for me to hear. Emily didn't contradict him. I began to feel like a guest in her life, someone who needed permission to exist. Then came the argument, the one that sealed everything. It happened over something small, something stupid. I saw a photo on social media, Emily and Mark at his parents' house. A family dinner, everyone smiling, everyone included. I wasn't invited. The hurt bubbled over. I called her immediately. "I didn't know you were in town," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We decided last minute," she replied. "You could have told me. It wasn't a big deal." "It is to me," I said. There was silence. Then Mark's voice. "She doesn't need to report her movements to you." I froze. "Excuse me," I said. Emily didn't stop him. "She's married," he continued. "You need to stop guilt-tripping her." My hands shook. "I'm her mother," I said. "This doesn't concern you." "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. "You're choosing him over me." She didn't deny it. "If you make me choose," she said, her voice shaking, "I won't choose you." The sentence hung between us like smoke. "I never thought I'd hear that from you," I whispered. "I'm not a little girl anymore," she said. "You have to let go." Then she hung up. I sat there for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. That was the first time my daughter chose her husband over me. And it wouldn't be the last. That night, I cried until my chest hurt. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears soaking into my pillow. Grief curling deep inside me. I realized something terrifying. I was losing her. Not suddenly, not cruelly, but piece by piece. And I had no idea how to stop it. There is a particular kind of pain that comes from realizing you are no longer seen as a person but as an obstacle. I didn't notice it all at once. Like everything else, it crept in slowly, quietly, wearing the disguise of concern, of boundaries, of what's best. After the night Emily told me she wouldn't choose me, I stopped calling. Not because I didn't want to hear her voice, but because I was afraid of what I might hear instead. Days passed, then weeks. I checked my phone constantly, even though I told myself I wouldn't. I carried it from room to room like it was a fragile thing, like if I put it down for too long, I might miss the moment she remembered me. She didn't call. I tried to convince myself this was healthy, that giving her space was the mature thing to do, that this was what letting go looked like. But letting go didn't feel peaceful. It felt like erasing myself. The silence gave me too much time to think, to replay every conversation, every sigh, every moment she had chosen not to defend me. I wondered when I had crossed the line from loving mother to problem that needed managing. The answer came sooner than I expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone finally rang. Emily's name lit up the screen. My heart jumped so hard it actually hurt. "Hi," I said, trying to sound calm, like I hadn't been waiting for this. "Hi, Mom," she replied. Her voice was careful, measured, the way you talk when you've rehearsed something. "How are you?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said. "Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something." I sat down. "Okay." Another pause. "Mark and I think it would be good if we had some boundaries." There it was. Boundaries. The word had become popular in recent years, healthy, empowering, necessary. I understood that. I respected it. But hearing it now felt like a door quietly locking. "What kind of boundaries?" I asked. She took a breath. "Well, less calling, and maybe fewer visits. At least for a while." "At least for a while," I repeated. "Yes," she said quickly. "Just until things feel less tense." "Tense?" I asked. "Between us?" "Yes," she said. "You get emotional, Mom, and it puts me in a difficult position." "A difficult position?" "I didn't realize loving you was difficult," I said softly. She sighed the same sigh I'd come to dread. "This is exactly what I mean." I closed my eyes. So what are you saying? I asked. You want me to disappear? No, she said immediately. Just step back. Step back from what? From my daughter's life? From the role I had lived for over 30 years? I already have, I said. I stopped calling. I noticed, she replied. And honestly, it's been calmer. That word hit harder than any insult. Calmer, as if my presence had been a storm. I didn't know I caused so much chaos, I said. She didn't respond. Is this coming from you? I asked quietly. Or from Mark? There was a long silence. Why does it matter? She finally said, because it mattered to me. Because I need to know if my daughter still feels this way, I said, or if someone else is speaking for her. Her voice hardened. Mark is my husband. We talk about everything. His feelings matter. And mine? I asked. Another pause. I can't do this right now, she said. I just wanted to be honest. Honest about what? I asked. That I'm a problem? That you need to adjust, she replied. We both do. We, not us. We hung up shortly after that. I sat there long after the call ended, staring at my hands. They looked older than I remembered. Thinner, veins more visible. Hands that had packed lunches, wiped tears, braided hair. Hands that suddenly had nowhere to go. After that conversation, everything shifted. Emily stopped sharing details about her life. No more stories about work. No more casual complaints. When she did call, which became rare, our conversations were surface level and short. How are you? Fine. Work okay? Busy. She sounded like someone talking to a distant relative. Polite. Detached. Once, I tried to tell her about a doctor's appointment I'd had. Nothing serious, just a scare that turned out to be nothing. Oh, she said. I'm glad you're okay. That was it. No follow-up. No concern. I hung up and stared at the wall, realizing that if something had been wrong, if I had been truly sick, I wasn't sure she would have rushed to my side. That thought terrified me. I started noticing changes in myself too. I stopped cooking big meals, stopped setting the table properly, stopped buying groceries she liked just in case she visited. I moved through my days quietly, carefully, like I was afraid of taking up too much space even in my own life. Friends asked about Emily. How's your daughter? They'd say, smiling. She's good. I replied automatically. I didn't tell them the truth, that I didn't really know anymore. The worst part wasn't the distance. It was the blame. Slowly, subtly, I became the reason for everything that went wrong. If Emily sounded tired, it was because our conversations were draining. If she felt stressed, it was because she felt caught in the middle. If Mark was irritated, it was because I was overstepping. Once, during a rare visit I had driven up after weeks of hesitation, Mark pulled me aside. I think you need to work on letting go, he said calmly, like he was offering advice. This isn't about letting go, I replied. It's about staying connected. You're too attached, he said. It's not healthy. I stared at him. You're not her parent, I said quietly. And you're not her priority, he replied just as quietly. Emily stood nearby. She heard him. She said nothing. That silence told me everything I needed to know. After that visit, Emily sent me a long message. She said she loved me. She said she appreciated everything I'd done. She said she needed space. She said my expectations were unfair. She said I made her feel guilty. She said she hoped I would work on myself. I read the message 3 times. Not once did she say she missed me. Not once did she say she needed me. I realized then that I had been recast. In her life story, I was no longer the foundation. I was the complication. The thing that needed managing, minimizing, correcting. I cried that night harder than I had in years. Not because she was gone, but because she was still alive and choosing to live without me. That grief is different. It doesn't end. Weeks turned into months. I learned to live with the absence, to wake up without expecting her call, to go to bed without checking my phone. And yet, some part of me still waited. Then one afternoon, the call came. Mom, Emily said, her voice strained. What's wrong? I asked immediately. We're having a baby. For a moment, the world stopped. A baby? I whispered. Yes, she said. I'm pregnant. Joy and fear crashed into each other inside my chest. Oh, Emily, I said, tears filling my eyes. That's wonderful. There was hesitation on the line. We wanted to tell you, she continued. But we also need to be clear about something. My heart sank. Okay? I said. Mark and I have decided we're going to keep things limited. At least at first. Limited? I asked. Visits. Involvement. We want to do this our way. I understood then. Even this miracle came with conditions. I'm happy for you, I said slowly. Truly. Thank you, she replied. I hope you can respect our wishes. I hung up after that and sat in silence. I was going to be a grandmother, and I had never felt more alone. I didn't know then how much worse things would get. I didn't know how completely I would be shut out. And I certainly didn't know that this child, this baby, would eventually become the reason everything changed. For better and for worse. The first time I held my grandchild, I did it in my mind, not in my arms. I had imagined the moment countless times. Emily would call me, her voice trembling with excitement. Mom, come over. It's time. I want you here. I would drive across town, my heart pounding like it was going to burst. And then I would cradle this tiny, fragile life, my blood, my daughter's blood, continuing the story we started together. But that didn't happen. Not that day. Not that week. Not that month. Instead, I was told I wasn't ready. Mom, Emily said carefully, her voice clipped as though she were testing every word before it left her mouth. We think it's best if you wait until Mark and I say the time is right. I remember the exact place I was when she said it. I had been sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the unopened baby clothes I had bought for her months before, still folded neatly, tags attached. My hands ached to touch them. My heart ached to touch her. Wait? I asked. My voice was softer than I wanted it to be. Wait for what? I'm your mother. You know I love this baby already. Emily paused, and I heard Mark in the background. His voice low, firm. Mom, we're not saying you don't love the baby. We need control over how things happen. It's our family now. I remember pressing my hands against my face, trying to stop the tears from falling. My legs shook, and my chest felt hollow. Control. Our family now. It was as if I had been erased from the story I had spent decades helping to write. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. I wanted to collapse on their doorstep and demand to hold the baby, to feed the baby, to whisper into tiny ears the lullabies I had sung to Emily herself. But I didn't, because Emily was calm, measured, determined. I realized then that any outburst on my part wouldn't bring me closer, it would push me further away. And so I waited. Weeks turned into months. I watched from a distance, scrolling through carefully curated social media posts. Pictures of Emily holding the baby, smiling, radiant. Pictures of Mark with his arm around her shoulder, eyes bright with pride. Pictures of the baby wrapped in soft blankets, tiny fists curled, sleeping peacefully. And every time I looked, I felt a pang deep in my chest. A mixture of pride and grief I couldn't separate. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to call, to text, to ask to see them. But I had learned my lessons. Every request, every well-meaning inquiry had been interpreted as pressure, intrusion, or emotional manipulation. Every message sent without their approval seemed to push Emily further away. So I waited. I became invisible. Except I wasn't really invisible. I was constantly aware of what I was missing. I was painfully aware of the milestones, the first smiles, the first steps, the first words I would not witness. And even as I tried to distract myself with work, hobbies, or friends, the ache remained. It was one of those nights late winter, the house dark, the world quiet, when I realized how profoundly I had been cut off. I was sipping tea alone, the steam fogging the glass window in front of me, imagining the nursery Emily had painted. Yellow walls, stuffed animals neatly arranged on the shelves, the crib in the corner where my grandchild slept. I could almost see the baby's tiny hand, reaching out, grasping for me. And I couldn't touch it. I couldn't hold it. I couldn't be part of their lives. And that's when the anger hit me. It wasn't immediate. Not the way rage often strikes. It was slow, simmering, spreading through my body like fire through dry brush. Anger at Mark for making me feel unwelcome. Anger at Emily for choosing him over me. Anger at myself for not fighting harder, for not demanding my place, for letting boundaries become barriers. I thought about calling, leaving a message, showing up. But then I remembered the last time I tried something similar. The coldness in Emily's voice, the authority in Mark's tone, the polite but firm rejection. I realized that if I forced my way in, it wouldn't be love they would see, it would be intrusion. And intrusion would only confirm their decision to keep me out. So I stayed away. But I couldn't stop the grief. Then came the day when Emily sent a picture that broke me in half. It was her holding the baby, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. A tiny hat covered the newborn's head, and Emily's eyes shone with pure joy. But the way she framed the picture, the angle, the captions no one else allowed, it was a message I couldn't ignore. I stared at it for hours, the tears falling silently. I wanted to comment. I wanted to say something heartfelt. But I knew any words I wrote would be interpreted as guilt, criticism, or desperation. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just being excluded. I was being replaced. Emily had built a new world, one that did not require me. One where I existed only as a memory, a whisper of the mother who once was. And Mark had become the gatekeeper of my own child's life. I had raised Emily to be independent, confident, and strong. I had prayed she would grow into a woman who could make decisions for herself. But now, I was witnessing those decisions being made against me. Against the mother who had given everything. Against the woman who had kept her safe through every heartbreak, every storm, every lonely night. And I realized I was powerless. Months passed. I tried everything to stay connected without pushing. Care packages, handwritten letters, texts wishing them well, birthday cards for both Emily and the baby, even small gifts, a blanket I had knitted myself, a set of toys I remembered Emily loving as a child. I thought that would be enough. It wasn't. Everything I sent was returned politely, with thanks, but with no invitation. No acknowledgement beyond a brief "we appreciate it." I had imagined holding my grandchild, teaching them to read, singing lullabies, telling them stories of Emily's childhood. But every attempt to participate was carefully deflected. The worst part? I could see it in Emily's face during video calls. Her expressions were kind, warm even, but there was a line in her eyes I could not ignore. The line that said, "I love you, but I cannot choose you over my family now." I understood that line. I understood it rationally. I understood that she was building her own life, her own family, and that I was meant to step back. But understanding does not erase pain. One evening, almost 9 months after the baby was born, I got a message I will never forget. "Mom, we're coming to town. We'll be staying at our place. Please understand we'd like you to wait outside for the first visit. We want the baby to settle in first. Wait outside." I read the message 3 times. My hands shook. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to run to them and grab the baby and tell Emily, "I am here. I have always been here." But I didn't. I obeyed. I waited outside. And when Emily and Mark opened the door, the baby in Emily's arms, I felt like a ghost, the living, breathing mother of my child's child. And yet I had no place. Emily smiled at me nervously. Mark's hand hovered protectively near the baby. They stepped inside, the door closing between us. And I stayed outside. I stood on the porch, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter, cooing, and small cries that belonged to the baby I had not yet held. I felt the wind on my face, sharp and cold, and wondered how love could feel like this, so close, so raw, yet utterly denied. It was the first time I truly understood that being a mother, even a grandmother, did not guarantee a role in my family's life. That love, no matter how deep, could be set aside. I waited there for an hour, and when Emily finally came out, she held the baby carefully, smiling, proud. I reached for my hand, longing, desperate. "Mom," she said softly, "I'll hold the baby soon. Just not yet." And just like that, my child, my grandchild, and I were strangers. That night, I cried harder than I had since David died. I realized that grief isn't just about loss of life. Sometimes it's about loss of place, loss of role, loss of the intimacy and connection you thought were permanent. I was grieving a family that still existed, still breathed, still loved me, but from which I had been deliberately excluded. And the worst part, I couldn't even be angry at Emily completely. She was a mother now. She was building a life. She was entitled to protect her child. It was Mark I wanted to hate. And yet, I couldn't fully. He was polite, careful, and protective, not cruel. But he was the reason my daughter felt she had to enforce boundaries. And so I sat with a complex cocktail of love, grief, anger, and helplessness, waiting for a time I feared might never come, a time when I would hold my grandchild and be allowed to whisper, "I love you. I've always loved you." The days had grown colder. Winter had returned with the same relentless patience as always, and the world outside my window was a mirror of my own stillness. Snow blanketed the streets, the same streets I had walked countless times with my children in hand. I remembered the little boots I had tied, the mittens I had sewn, and the warmth of a small hand pressing into mine, the hand that once trusted me to protect her from everything, even when I couldn't. I sat in my living room, the soft hum of the heater filling the silence. My phone lay beside me, silent, unyielding, indifferent. I hadn't called Emily in days, not because I didn't want to, but because I had learned the lesson that had taken me far too long to understand. Some love is not measured by proximity, by daily calls, or even by the ability to hold someone in your arms. Sometimes love is measured in restraint, in letting go. It was February when I finally received a message that would shift everything again. The notification pinged softly, and I almost didn't pick it up, fearing another reminder of how much I had been shut out. But something in me, the part that always hoped, always believed, made me answer. "Mom, can we come by tomorrow? We'd like you to meet the baby properly." The words blurred on the screen. My hands shook as I read them again. I reread them, almost thinking my eyes were deceiving me. But no. There it was. An invitation, fragile and hesitant, but an invitation nonetheless. I didn't sleep that night. I cleaned my living room meticulously, making it bright, warm, welcoming. I baked cookies, wrapped small gifts for the baby, and practiced what I might say. Would I cry? Would I be calm? Would Emily see the trembling hands that had held her through heartbreak and fear? The next morning, I drove carefully to their home, my heart thrumming like a drum. Emily opened the door before I even rang the bell, her smile cautious, almost apologetic. She held the baby in her arms, wrapped snugly in a soft blanket. Mark stood slightly behind, arms crossed, his usual protective posture softened just a little by the presence of his daughter-in-law, my child. "Mom," Emily said softly, "thank you for coming." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you for inviting me," I replied. For a moment, I simply watched. The baby yawned, a tiny, perfect yawn that made me ache with a love so fierce it was almost unbearable. And then, cautiously, I reached forward. Emily didn't flinch. Mark didn't move. I held my grandchild, trembling, feeling the delicate weight of life that was in part mine. I can't believe you're here," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. Emily's eyes glistened. "It's time, Mom," she said. I want you here." It was a small victory, fragile and hard won, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that love could endure even when strained. Enough to remind me that while families can fracture, they can also heal, sometimes in unexpected ways. Over the next few hours, I learned a truth I hadn't fully realized before. Letting go doesn't mean disappearing. It doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting the ones you love to live their lives while knowing that your love is still present, even if unseen. Emily watched me carefully as I held her child. She sat close, but not too close, giving me space yet allowing me intimacy. Mark stayed nearby, still protective, but his posture softened. He said little, letting the moment exist for what it was, a mother reconnecting with her grandchild. And as I gazed into the baby's tiny eyes, I realized something profound. Love isn't always about being first. It isn't about control. It isn't about being present at every moment. Sometimes, love is the patient, quiet force that waits until the world allows you to step forward. Sometimes, love is the lesson we give others by our absence and our restraint. I spent the day quietly observing, gently interacting, laughing softly at the baby's small movements, murmuring lullabies I had sung to Emily herself. And when Emily leaned against me, whispering a quiet thank you, I realized that she had learned something from me too. That love, real love, endures even when challenged. By the time I left that day, the sky was pink and gold, the snow reflecting the fading light. I hugged Emily tightly. I kissed my grandchild on the forehead. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel excluded. I didn't feel powerless. I felt whole. The drive home was quiet, but it was not empty. My heart felt full in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel for a long time. I realized that this was the final lesson I needed to learn, the last chapter of pain before healing could truly begin. I had loved Emily enough to let her go. I had loved her enough to let Mark enter her life. I had loved her enough to accept boundaries, even when they felt cruel. And now, that love, patient, enduring, unwavering, had brought me back to where I belonged. Standing by my window that night, I looked out at the streets I had walked countless times with Emily in hand. The same streets, the same cold air, the same snow falling softly against a darkened sky. And I realized something important. Love is never truly lost. It shifts, it changes, it moves around obstacles, but it always endures. I didn't know what the future would hold. I didn't know how often I would see my grandchild, or whether Emily would fully allow me back into the rhythms of their life. But I knew this. My love had survived, and that was enough. Sometimes the hardest lessons are also the most beautiful. They teach us patience. They teach us restraint. They teach us the strength it takes to love without possession, to care without control, to hope without demand. And in that moment, I understood that my relationship with Emily, though changed, was not broken. It was evolving, and that evolution, painful as it had been, was still filled with love. As I close this chapter, I want to share a message not just for mothers, not just for daughters, but for anyone navigating the complexities of love and family. Love does not always look the way we expect. Sometimes it requires distance. Sometimes it requires patience. And sometimes it is the quiet, unseen force that holds us together, even when we think we have been torn apart. If there is one thing I have learned, it is this. Love is stronger than absence, stronger than misunderstanding, stronger than the fear that we will be forgotten. And sometimes when we let go, we are rewarded with a love that is deeper, purer, and more enduring than anything we could have imagined. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you connected with Emily in my journey, or if this reminded you of someone in your own life, I invite you to subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. Hit the like button if this story touched your heart, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. I read every one of them. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that explores family, love, and the challenges we all face in relationships. And remember, love is patient, love is enduring, and sometimes love is the hardest lesson we ever learn, but it is always worth it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.